And we're back
to another episode of The Road to Code.
Oh yeah. What episode is this?
4.
Yeah, our last episode, man, we just completely blew it, didn't we? Man, we were lost. Is it 2? Is it 3? Like, which one is it? So, but yeah, I think we have our numbers straightened out. Episode number 4. So, all right, very cool. I'm Victor. I am one of the co-hosts to the Road to Show podcast.
And I'm John, the other co-host.
And I am Gerard, the other co-host.
The other co-host. I like that. That is kind of cool. Very cool. So, Jonathan.
Yep.
Let's start with some merch.
Oh, yeah. We have some merch. So on our official website, theroadtocode.net, we have a official merch tab that opens up our merch page.
That's right. So if you want to buy some merch to support our show, it would be greatly appreciated. We have t-shirts, we have mugs, we have long sleeve tees, we have hoodies and tote bags.
Yeah.
Very cool. But we have a new method of people or our viewers of being able to support us. What is that, Jonathan?
Yes. Right now, we have the official Road to Code Patreon, where you could subscribe, and we have different tiers that provide different options. So to become an official Patreon or patron, you donate $5 a month and you get a free Road to Code mug.
Nice.
Early access or early notification of our YouTube videos and a yearly postcard of appreciation.
Very nice.
And the all access patron gets everything from tier 1 basically. And also they get to join us as a guest host every quarter.
Oh, very nice.
Which is fun, getting to talk about technology and stuff.
Yeah.
And the VIPs get all of the stuff from the last 2 tiers, and also raw footage of our Road to Code episode, and also be a guest as well.
That's right. That's right. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, we kept it pretty affordable, $5, $8, and $10. We didn't want to go with anything extraordinary on those costs. We know people are tight on cash, but these videos do take time, and a lot of times it takes a lot of time to do the research and whatnot. And we're hoping that this is real world content that you can use if you're a technology expert or an up and coming technology expert. And if this is benefiting you, your patronage is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Jonathan, what do we have in store for the next step of our Ziginificant application?
What we're going to be going through is authentication and authorization.
That's right.
We're going to be adding entity framework to the solution, and have to deal with the SQL Server kind of.
Well, yeah, with entity framework, that goes out the door. We don't even have to deal with SQL Server at that point anymore.
And then we'll be using code first approach to manage updates to the database and tables.
Very cool. Very exciting for that.
And then our next thing would be adding a user controller. So that way they can handle API calls for the registering a user.
That's right. Because you created the page on the last episode, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll also do a login, password, and then a delete account. Using the whole CRUD process.
That'll be in the future, though.
Yeah, the future.
I think today just setting up the register is going to be enough work.
And then finally, we'll add a user repository, and it'll interact with the data context for managing the data in SQL Server.
Very nice. All right. let's go ahead and share your screen and let's get started. Let's get some code going, Jonathan. Very cool. All right. So, Jonathan, let's start by removing nullable warnings in the project. There's, I noticed last time we were getting quite a few errors.
Nullable. Disable.
Disable it. Yep.
Damn.
And then, yeah, you just hit the save up on top. Yep. Either one.
Floppy disks.
The floppy disks. All right. Cool. That's been disabled. You can go ahead and close this up. Oh, man. We need to add a couple of NuGet packages. And so these NuGet packages, you're going to have to right click on that project and manage NuGet packages. And yeah, the first one that we need to add is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And then you have to go to browse because you don't have it installed. Yeah. So go ahead and click on that first one and install that puppy. All right. So the other the other one that we need to add is .design. And then the final one is .SQL Server.
Right.
All right, very cool. Let's yeah, remove the pins on all those. And you can go ahead and close this package manager. And let's clean and rebuild everything, make sure everything's still compiling correctly. All right, so Jonathan, we need to add a data class. And so we're going to want to put that inside of a folder called data. And so in here, let's create a UserAccount.cs file. All right. And so we're going to add 4 properties on here. The first one is going to be a property called ID. The second one is going to be email. Third is password hash. And the fourth is going to be password salt. So this class that we're creating here represents the structure of the data. And so in order for our code first approach to work, we have to add what we call annotations to this particular class. So this is an data annotations called schema that Entity Framework is going to use in order to determine the name of the table that it needs to create for us. Okay. And then also we need to tell it that the ID property in this class is the key, the primary key. Remember how we create a primary key and we say auto increment the key and all that stuff in SQL? So just by putting a key attribute in here, it takes care of that for us automatically. Now, that's another one that we need to bring in. We need to bring in the first one, the data annotations. Yep. And then for the email, we need a couple of things. We need 2 annotations in there, and we can separate the annotations with commas. But the first annotation that we need is one called required. And then the second one, you can separate it with the comma, is string length. And we want to limit that to 50. So this is going to drive the table structure. This is going to say, hey, we cannot insert nulls, and the size of this field is 50. And so we're also going to do the same with password hash and password hash salt. They're both going to be required, but the string length is going to be 128. And you could just copy that line and paste it on the. So here's a trick. Instead of highlighting it, go ahead and just click anywhere on that line. Just do a Control-C. And then go put your cursor anywhere on the password salt. Just don't highlight anything. Just put it somewhere. And just Control-V.
Whoa.
Pretty cool, huh?
Nice.
So one of the things, Jonathan, is that when you're putting annotations, you want to put an empty line in between the property. Exactly. Yeah. This separates it and says these annotations belong to these properties. Yeah. Let's save this. And okay. So the second thing that we need to do in that same folder, in that data folder, we need to create a context, a DB context, they call it. And so let's go ahead and create a new class, add new class, and let's call it data context. And so this particular class needs to be subclassed from a class called DB context. So at the end of line 3, you just add : DB context, proper casing. And of course, we're going to have to bring in the user, the using namespace. So go ahead and hover over it and let's see what potential fixes it gives us. Yeah, so we want to bring in the first option, which is the entity framework. Cool. And we're going to add a property to this particular class. And the type, that int, is actually going to be a DB set. And then you're going to do open close brackets. And inside those brackets, it's going to be the user account, which basically is the same class that you just created. And then your property, where it says my property, is going to be called user accounts, plural. And then there's a, let's go ahead and give me a blank line. Yeah, there's a method that already exists in a DB context that we need to override. Okay, so DB context has this method. It's called onModel creating, right? And so the way that you would override it is you just type the word override, and it's called onModel creating. And we want the base onModel creating to be the very last line that it executes in that method. So we're going to add new lines before that. And it's, oh, you know, one of the things that Visual Studio 22 does, it does predictions. It says, hey, is this what you want to start typing? And that just happens to be exactly what we need. So if you just press tab, it actually does it for us.
Nice.
And so here you can just go ahead and finish that off with the semicolon. And inside those parentheses, we need to create a method, or we need to add a function. So we're going to be passing in a parameter. We're going to call it entity. And then we're going to use a fat arrow function and open up our curly braces to start the function, or the body of the function. And what we're going to do is we're going to say entity, and we're going to call a couple of expressions that are in there. You could do hasIndex, dot hasIndex. And in there, we're going to pass in yet another function. And this is going to be, we're going to have to pass in a parameter. So we'll pass in E. And then, oh, look at that. It does some prediction for you.
Oh, wow.
So you go ahead and tab, but ID is actually email, what we need. And we want to say that email, that we're going to create an index on that email table, and go ahead and put a comma in there. And we're going to call that one, we're going to give it a SQL Server naming convention. And that SQL Server naming convention is IX, which is short for index, underscore, and then the name of the table, which is UserAccounts, and then underscore email. And we're going to add underscore unique because we're going to specify that this index needs to be unique. In other words, when we register a new user, we cannot register two users with the same address. So this email, whenever a record is inserted in here, we need to guarantee that all emails are unique. So in the next line, let's go ahead and call dot is unique, and it'll add.
Uh-oh.
Oh, look at that! It just predicts. It's reading your mind, Jonathan. All right. So let's go ahead and save this. Oh man, so we have our DB context. So this is what is actually going to create our data structure in SQL Server. Okay. Let's go ahead and open up the program.cs file, because in there we need to add a couple of things. So let's scroll down to program.cs and open up that puppy. Go ahead and just double click on that. So what they've done is they've done a simplified form of the main method. So in this version of .NET and C#, you no longer need to have that main method. It's just, it assumes that any code that you put in here just belongs in the main method. So it essentially, when it compiles, it says, oh, let me take all this code and put it inside that main method. And so it makes our code a little cleaner. And so they've actually were kind to add some comments and say, hey, this represents your services and this represents your configuration section. So right under the add service to the container, we want to be able to add the injector service or the dependency injection service for our DB context, so that any class that we're going to be creating, it just automatically injects the DB context into that particular class. And that's going to be done through the builder.services. And it'll be add DB context. And then inside angle brackets, we're going to put in our data context class. And it's not going to find it, so we need to bring in the namespace. So if you hover over it, this takes a function. So we need to do open close parenthesis, and let's just type in options, and we'll do our fat arrow function. And then in here, we want to say options dot. Essentially, what we're telling is our entity framework, we're saying, hey, we're going to use SQL Server. And you can finish that line off with the semicolon. And let's go fix that using SQL Server. Let's go ahead and bring in the namespace for entity framework. And yeah, let's finish off with the semicolon at the end of line 10. So that sets up our dependency injection so that it automatically just injects into our classes as we need it. Now, down into the configure the HTTP request pipeline, we need to add another service. So let's go ahead and use, let's put the using statement in there. So you can just type in using tab. Oh, it won't let you do it in here. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. And let's just say var, and it'll be service scope, and we can abbreviate that with SVC scope. And that's going to be equal to app.services.get required services. And the type of service is going to be iService scope factory. And you're going to need, go ahead and open close parenthesis again. And then you need another close parenthesis.
Oh, on the outside.
Yeah. All right, cool. And then so inside that, the body of that particular method, we want to go ahead and say, oh, well, let me explain what this method is going to do, okay? Essentially, what this method is going to do is every time the application loads into memory, which means that the first person to hit the website and launches the application, it's going to go and check to make sure that our database is up to date with all the database structure, all the tables that we need in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up a context. So we'll need a var context. And this is going to be equal to the service scope dot service provider. get service. And the service that we want to get is going to be the data context that we created. Finish that off with an open close parenthesis and a semicolon at the very end. And then we want to call context.database.migrate. And so essentially, this is going to upgrade our database to the latest structure that we specified inside the data context, which means that if that user accounts table doesn't exist, it upgrades it creates that table in our database. If the index doesn't exist, it creates the index for us. It takes care of all that for us. And that's what this piece of code is going to take care of. Very cool. So one of the things that we did, Jonathan, is that on line 9, we specified that we're going to need a connection string, which means that we need to add a connection string to our app settings. So we're not going to modify our app settings.json file. We're going to go ahead and expand app settings.json file. We're going to modify the app settings.development.json. And in here, what we want to do is we want to add a new node called connection strings. And so let's go ahead and create the double quotes in here. I'll walk you through how this connection string works. Okay, so the first piece is going to be, where is this server located? So you're going to put server equals and then local inside a parentheses. So essentially, it's going to be on your machine where you want the connection to be. And then we want to separate it with the semicolon, and then we want to specify the database. What database? And then for the purpose of our local environment, we'll go ahead and specify that the user ID is the system administrator, the SA. And then go ahead and put another semicolon, and then we'll go ahead and give it the password. Do you remember what your password is? All right. That's a very secure password there, Jonathan.
No one's going to figure it out.
Okay. So let's open up SQL Server, because we want to pull the covers on the magic that's about to happen here. Okay, so you have a significant. That's fine, because we're calling it significant DB. So we're going to have 2 of them in here, which is fine. Go ahead and collapse that. Let's go ahead and launch the application.
Okay.
Yeah, don't ask me again. And yes.
Sweet.
Yes. Install a virus. Windows for you right there. Uh-oh. What happened here?
All right.
Failed to load the configuration from Azure. Oh, can we go look at the app settings.development.json? Go ahead and stop this. Let's go see. Go look at the app settings. Yep. Oh, we're missing a comma at the end of line 4.
Got it.
Yeah, we need that comma in there. It's a JSON file, for goodness sake. Go ahead and save this and run it again.
All right.
What does it say? Add DB context was called with configuration, but the type data context is not declared. Go ahead and stop this. Let's see what's going on. So Jonathan, what we forgot in the data context is that we need to give it a constructor, and we can easily do that. So you need to be inside the class. Yep. And give me a blank line in there. If you just type in CTOR, CTOR, which is the last half of my name, then tab, we get the constructor. And in this constructor, we're going to be passing in a parameter. Well, not we, but the code that we put in the program.cs folder, it's going to inject a DB context option. In other words, it's going to send in the connection string. So this is going to be DB context options. And then inside angle brackets, you're going to put data context, which is this particular class name. And then the name that we want to give it is options. But we're not going to do anything with this parameter. We actually want to pass it down to the DB context, which is the class that we inherit from. So we can do that with a colon, base, and then inside parentheses, pass in the options. So all we're doing is just, we're passing it to our parent class. We're saying, hey, we inherited all this functionality and we know that you need this functionality. So here you go, have at it. Let's go ahead and save this and try to run it again, see what happens. What does it say?
System argument null exception, value cannot be null. Parameter connection string.
Default connection. Can we make sure that they're spelled the same?
Default connection.
Go ahead and stop it. You can copy default connection from here. Just double click on it.
Whoops.
Copy. And then let's go over to the app settings development.json. And let's paste it in there to make sure that they're spelled identical. All right, let's go ahead and save it. Oh, look at connection strings is incorrect. You did it twice, Jonathan. Misspelling is the killer of all productivity.
There we go.
Boom.
Oh,
That's fine. You can go ahead and hit advance and continue to localhost unsafe. Install the virus. Yes.
hey.
All right. So let's go ahead and leave this up and let's go over to SQL Server. And let's refresh. You can right click on databases. Yeah, go ahead and expand databases. You go and expand it. Look at, we have a new database called Significant DB.
Nice.
Let's go ahead and expand that Significant DB and let's expand tables. And it created, well, wait a second. It didn't create our user table. Interesting how it created the database, but it didn't create our user table. The reason, okay, is because even though it had the instructions that said, okay, hey, I got a connection string that says I'm supposed to connect to my local SQL server, and the name of the database is Significant DB, and I've been instructed to go and make sure that that database exists. But in order for it to know that it needs to create the table user accounts, we need to give it the instructions on how to create it. Okay. So let's go ahead and stop the application, go back to the browser and just click and close the application. And let's go back to Visual Studio. So within Visual Studio, let's go ahead and click on the Windows on your lower left-hand corner on the Windows and type in PowerShell. Now, Gerard, Windows PowerShell, that's the one we want. That, yeah, that one right there. Gerard, there's no reason to be jealous here. Microsoft knew that they were light years behind Linux when it came to the terminal. And so they created a terminal that's equivalent and just as powerful as Linux, which is called PowerShell. We're not here to learn PowerShell, but just if you're ever interested in finding the equivalent commands between a terminal in Linux and a terminal in Windows, everything that Linux does, Windows is capable of doing it within the PowerShell. It's very new. It's only like, I want to say 5, maybe 8 years old. Like, it could be a little bit more, maybe up to 10 years old. But the PowerShell is what's supposed to be equivalent to the Linux terminal in Windows. Okay. So, Jonathan, what we need to do is we need to install some tools. So we're going to tell .NET to install our .NET Entity Framework tools. And the way that we do that is we type in .NET space tool. space install. And we're going to install it globally. So we'll do a space -G and then space .NET-EF for entity framework. Yeah, .NET entity framework. Go ahead and press enter. Whoa.
All right.
It was successfully installed, which meant that you didn't have it installed before. But had you had it installed, it would have said, hey, you already have it installed. Here's the version you have. And what we would have had to do is we would have had to do .NET tool update. So if you do up arrow, and then with your arrow, you can just, instead of install, you can just do update. And press enter. So had it been installed, this would have installed the latest version. So, but it installed the latest version for you. So now that we have those tools all set, okay, we need to open up a PowerShell command, but we need to open it up in the folder where your project exists. Yep, that's it. Press enter. So this puts us right into the project, because remember, the solution exists one folder above the project. So it takes us all the way to the project. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to create our initial scripts for the migrations to exist. And it can then update our database. So let's go ahead and type in .NET-EF all together, space migrations, add. And then we're going to give it a name of initial create, just put proper casing on there. So this is the initial creation of our database and our tables. Go ahead and press enter. I don't know if you notice the folder shifted in Visual Studio. So let's go over to Visual Studio. And you'll notice that there's a migrations folder now. Under data, under user accounts, there's a migrations folder. Yeah. So let's go ahead and expand that. And it created these classes for us. Essentially, is just saying, hey, when you run your migrations, by the way, here is the latest version that you need to run in order for your database to be up to date with everything that you need based on the classes, which hence why it's called code first, right? Because we write the classes, we give the data context instructions on what it's supposed to build, and through the data migrations command in the command line, it builds the exact instruction. So let's go ahead and open up that file, double click on it. Wow. Look at this, it's SQL code. There's our server identity, starts at 1, increments by 1. It creates an email, varchar 50. It creates a password hash, var binary 128, and the password salt. So it's basically going to create all these. It also creates the index, Ajax, user accounts, email, unique. And so all these commands are being sent over to SQL Server. And it says, hey, by the way, SQL Server, you got to get up to speed. Go ahead and run these commands and bring our database up to date. So wow. Go ahead and close this window. And let's run it again. And we'll wait for the site to come up. And again, this only runs on the first user who launches the website. Once the website is launched, no other user will execute that code. So go ahead and go to your browser and go ahead and say advance and go ahead and continue. Yes, install the virus. Let's go over to SQL Server and let's go look at that database now. And let's refresh the tables. Look at that, user accounts. Go ahead and expand it and go to indexes. Look at that, there's your index. User accounts, email, unique. Let's go to columns.
Wow.
And look at it created the primary key. Integer, not null.
Yeah. Wow, that was so easy.
I've been having you go through these painful moments of creating tables and stored procedures. And and ADO.net and it's like all these things, right? You know why I did it, Jonathan?
Yeah, that makes it so much easier. And like,
No,
it
no,
makes it
but you
so
know why I made you go through that painful process?
I understand why they make things like that now. Oh wow.
The reason I made you go through the manual process of creating tables and designing everything was because entity framework, as powerful as it may seem, it does have some limitations. And there will be cases that you're going to have to drop down into Visual Studio and write a stored procedure. There's going to be times that in C# you're going to have to use ADO.net in order to access your stored procedure directly, because it's a lot more complicated than something as creating a user table. But you got to admit, this is pretty freaking cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Let's go back and shut down the browser and let's go back into code. Stop galligagging. Let's get back to work. So, Jonathan, the other thing that we can do is if we find that in the program, if you go to program.cs, if we find that line 17 through 21, that is taking too long to execute during the startup of the application, we can actually run some of these manually. So if you go to the PowerShell command, we can run the command here to update our database. And right now it's not going to do anything because it's already up to date, but we can easily just run .NET EF, .NET-EF. Go ahead and type it in there. And so this essentially would run the same exact code as our migrations in our program.cs, but we're running it manually. This would have done the same thing. So if you don't want to put it in your code, you can go ahead and run it manually. You can put this into some automated pipeline. You can actually include this as part of the pipeline to upgrade your database to whatever new structure you need it based on the code that we're writing. But we're just going to go ahead and let it automatically do this for us because I don't want to deal with the database at this point. Some of the stuff that we're doing, we don't need to deal with it. And so we'll just go ahead and let the program work the magic for us. All right. Let's start creating our controller. Right click on controllers on the folder and add controller. All the way to the top. And go to API on the left, empty controller. And go ahead and call it UserController. You can just, UserController.cs. And press enter. So it does some work for us. It does more for us there so that we don't have to type all this up. Otherwise, I would have had to just having to type all this, include the namespace, and it's like, let Visual Studio do the work for us. Okay. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to create a constructor so that it injects certain information for us. We want it to automatically give us, inject certain things, and we need a logger. So go ahead and give me a constructor. And inside the parentheses, we need to receive some parameters. And the parameter that we want to receive is called iLogger. And the type of logger is going to be user controller. So inside angle brackets. And then so what we're going to do is we're going to call this parameter, we're going to give it a name of logger. Normally, you're going to have to write some code, but we're going to let Visual Studio do some work for us. Go ahead and right-click on that logger. And we want it to, actually, I'm sorry, hover over logger. Oh, it doesn't do it. Okay, go to the end of the R and press Control period. We want to create and assign field logger. Yep. Look at that. Look what it did. It added the property for you and it automatically assigned it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Let's go ahead and create a method called create account. And so we're going to receive some information, but it has to be from the body. So we have to put an attribute in there called from body. And this whole from body thing happens to be part of the HTTP specification. In other words, the Internet Protocol implementations or the specifications, I should say, that they're saying it's like, is it from the query? Is it from the headers? Is it from the body? So we're just saying, hey, this information is going to be in the body and it's going to represent a register model. So go ahead and just type in register model proper case. And this class doesn't exist. We have to create it. And let's just go ahead and call it model. And go ahead and start the body of the method by adding the open close curly braces. And then for right now, just go ahead and say return space OK, open close parenthesis, and terminate that with a, that's fine. OK model, that's fine. You can go ahead and leave it like that. The folder that we want to include it in, we need to create a new folder at the project level and go to add new folder. That folder is going to be called models. And we want to create another folder inside a model called requests. And in here, we want to go ahead and create register model.
A class?
Yes.
Oh,
that's fine. It actually appends the CS for you automatically. Okay, so this register model is going to have a total of 3 properties. And those 3 properties represent the email, the password, and the confirm password. All right, and then we need to add some attributes. These attributes are different from the attributes that we added to the user account because the user account attributes are going to drive the structure of our SQL database table structure. These attributes that we're about to add are going to drive the validation of when the data comes in through the body of the request. It's going to drive the validation, right? So on the email, we want to do a required attribute. All right. And let's put an error message in there. So open close parenthesis and then put error message equals. And then let's just put email is required. And then normally I would go ahead and separate by comma, but because these are fairly long, we can go ahead and do multiple attributes on different lines. So you can put another square brackets on the next line. And we want to make sure that we add the email address attribute. And we want to add an error message if it's not a valid email. So yeah, we just put email address must be valid. And then on the third attribute, remember our table length in our account, user account class, we limit it to 50 characters. So we're going to have to do the same thing here. We're going to say, hey, it can only be 50 characters long. And then, yeah, we'll do comma error message. And we just tell them email max length is 50 characters. Cool. Oof, let's go do our password. And on the password, go ahead and give me a blank line. So that's a required error message. You can just hit tab. It already predicts what you want to type. And go ahead and put the password is required inside of double quotes. And then on the next line, we're going to need another attribute. And this attribute is going to be called regular expression.
all right.
And let's go ahead and add the error message. Visual Studio gives you so much productivity with all that prediction. Reads your mind.
There it is.
And then I would add one more thing, Jonathan. I would say min length. I could go ahead and add a new attribute. And I would say 8 characters. minimum length is 8 characters. Characters.
Oh,
You need a C in between the A and T. There you go. All right. Give me a blank line after password, and let's add an attribute to confirm password, indicating that the confirm password is also required. Yep. And then there's one other attribute that we need to do is we need to make sure that password and confirm password are the same. So we're just going to do a compare. And we're going to indicate that it needs to compare this value with password. Damn it. Is that what the exclamation is there for?
they lost that.
Why do we have a squiggly? Oh, you got to do the close parenthesis.
Oh,
inside the square bracket. Yeah. There we go. All right. That takes care of our model for the request coming in from the React application. That is going to satisfy that model. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's go back to the user controller. And now we can hover over that register model, show potential fixes, and we can bring in the using namespace for the model requests, because that's the model that we just created, right? Now, we want to make sure that this works before we start flutzing around with the UI. And so let's go ahead and launch the application. Go ahead and save everything.
Oh,
and then launch the application. Oh, it actually saved it for you when you launched it. And while this is coming up, let's bring up Postman, because Postman delivers.
oh yeah.
Okay, so what is the address that we need to work with? Is that, I don't think that's the address. Let's go back to the browser. So let's grab that URL. Yep, copy that. And then Alt tab, and let's paste it as part of the base here. Yeah, go ahead and paste the whole thing. And then we want to do API /user. And then let's go ahead and go to on right below that, it says body. Let's go ahead and put it something in the body. And let's go ahead and send it, see what happens. Get rid of that last comma.
Oh,
yeah, it's an error. Yep. Send it. Uh-oh. Well, that didn't work. It says it cannot post. That sucks. And this is where I spun my wheels for a couple of days. Let's go over to Visual Studio Code. All right, scroll down. You see where it says Setup Proxy? Click in there. So remember how the browser comes up and it says, hey, we're launching a proxy? Well, now you got to go and configure every single new API endpoint. You have to come and configure it here in order for it to work, which is so dumb. So after line 8, go ahead and start a new line. And inside of double quotes, it'll be /API /user. We may have to close the browser. So go and close Edge, and then you may have to relaunch the application from Visual Studio. I don't think you need to do it from the initial launch. It doesn't make the changes. Like when you make the changes in the UI and you see the changes, that proxy only happens when it starts the application. I spun my wheels on this. There is no documentation anywhere to indicate that this is where you needed to make the change. Let's go back to Postman and hit that send button again. Yes. So yeah, I hope that I have saved a lot of developers who are playing around with Visual Studio 2022 and want to do an API using C# for the API and React as their front end. I hope that I have saved you days of work, okay? Because it was a situation. I was about to give up on this. I was like, oh, we're gonna have to do it from scratch and do something completely different because I don't get it. There's no documentation anywhere. Microsoft, bad on you. That's all I got to say. This is bad on you. Okay, you got to document these changes. Shame. Okay, there went my rant. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our validation is working. So let's go ahead and mess up the email, get rid of the @ and then submit that change. Go ahead and send it. Yes, the email must be valid. So we get that validation. Let's go ahead and fix your email and let's change one of the passwords. Yep. Go ahead.
Don't tell anyone my secret password.
That's right. The password must match. Go ahead and get rid of the lowercase p. And so it tells you the password and it also tells you that they got to match. Cool. So it does the validation. That's what those attributes. Now, those attributes are great for when you're using a web API application. If you're using a web call, like say, for example, an Azure function, it works very similar to this. Those attributes don't work. It works a lot differently. So you have to use something like fluid validation or something like that. But for this particular purpose, the data annotations work wonders. It's the best thing since sliced bread. I'll give Microsoft that one. They did good on that. I'm still very upset about the whole proxy thing. So Microsoft, just so you know. Okay. So all that worked. We got that set up. Let's go ahead and start creating our repository class. And let's go ahead and create a folder called repositories. And in here, we want to create a class. It's actually, we're going to create an interface. It's going to be called UserRepository. And instead of it being a class, it's going to be an interface. And we're going to have one method in here. What we're going to do is our interface is going to start with returning a task. So we're just going to go ahead and type in uppercase task. And we're going to go ahead and call create account async. And in here, we're going to be passing our register model. And go ahead and bring in the namespace. So this is just the signature of the method. Remember the contract? Remember the whole, hey, I need my house painted? Mm-hmm. That's all we're doing is just, hey, I need my house painted. The details are going to be in the implementation. So go ahead and save this. And let's create a new file in the repository folder. And we're going to call this one user repository. And so we need to implement the iRepository, the iUser repository. So at the end of the public class user repository, let's put a colon and let's implement iUser repository. Let's hover over that and show potential fixes. And we want to implement this interface.
Whoa.
See how it brought in the signature of that interface? But before we do that, before we implement, we're going to need a constructor. Remember the last part of my name. And what we're going to inject into here is the data context. So inside the parentheses, put the data context. And let's just go ahead and call this parameter. We're going to call it context. So after data context, just go ahead and call it context. So that is being injected, and that particular data context is being injected. If you go over to the program.cs, line 7 is what injects that DB context into our class. So whenever the repository is being used, it automatically just injects it for us. Let's go ahead and implement the create account async. Now, the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need a couple of variables. So on line 12, let's go ahead and create two variables. They're going to be an array of bytes. Password hash, comma, password salt. So what we need to do, Jonathan, is we need to take the plain English password and we need to encrypt it. So using one-way encryption, we're going to create a method. Let's go ahead and call that method generate password hash. And we're going to pass in, go ahead and open parenthesis, we're going to pass in model.password. We're also going to pass in the password hash, but we need to set it as an out parameter. In other words, we're passing in something that is unassigned, and it's up to this method to assign a value to it. And we want to do the same thing to the password hash. And let's hover over that generate password hash. Go ahead and show potential fixes and generate that method for us. So in that generate password, okay, what we're going to do is we need to use our using statement because we need to instantiate the HMAC SHA-512 class. This is a built-in class that comes with the .NET framework. And basically it's going to encrypt our password. It's going to use hashing algorithms to do a one-way encryption. So let's go ahead and put that using statement in there. Tab. And then inside the body of that using statement, let's go ahead and set up the password salt to be the HMAC key. And then the password hash is going to be hmac.computeHash. Yep, that whole thing. In there, we're going to do encoding. So it's proper case encoding dot uppercase, all uppercase UTF-8 dot. Oh, wait. Go ahead and do the get bytes password. Go ahead and tab out of there. But you see how it changed your encoding to, yeah, you got to type it in there and don't let it autocorrect for you. And just hover over it and bring in the namespace for that. Yep, the first one. So this is what's going to happen is that it's going to encode the password and basically turns it into an array. It grabs the character number. So like, for example, I don't know if you remember when we were working with our console app and when you typed in a letter, we had to go and convert that letter from a number to the character because of the ASCII chart. So that's essentially what this is doing. It's going to go and create an array of the numeric value of whatever character has been given. And it passes it into compute hash. It takes the salt and puts it together so that it generates a hash. And now a hash is a predictable value based on the string that's being passed in. So let's go back to line 25 because we already created our password and we already assigned it. What we want to do, we want to go ahead and add the user account. The data context is going to take care of that. So let's go ahead and do the call the data context. Do we have the data context? Yeah, we do. So let's go ahead and do context.userAccounts.add. And we're going to pass in a new account. The next line, we need one more line.
After password salt?
After that line 30, yeah. We need to do context dot save changes. Yep. So there's a couple of things that we didn't do. Is one of the things is that we're using synchronous programming here. We need to use asynchronous programming. There, under the context, if you go to the on line 25, if you go to the end of add, continue typing async. And then after save changes, also type in async. Okay, so what is it complaining about here? Oh, it's not complaining. Now, the other thing that we need to do is on line 21, you see the task? We need to put async as well. All right, now we got errors. Now we have a problem. Let's go ahead and hover over context and see what it's complaining about. Context.
This one.
The first one on line 25. Let's go to show potential fixes. It says, yeah, this is not what I was expecting. Let's go ahead and add a wait before context. Oof, man, oh man. That's some code there, huh? And this is in the simplest form. I mean, we need to add some more, but we're going to leave this for now. Go ahead and save this. And let's go to our user controller and add some code in there. So after line 14, let's go ahead and log some information. So go ahead and say logger.log info. And then after the double quote, let's put a comma and let's go ahead and pass in the model, because when we log this, this is going to be important because this is going to get picked up by application insights at Azure, not so much on our local machine, but in Azure. It'll at least give us a picture of the steps that it took to get all this done, right? So now we're going to go ahead and start our actual work. Okay, on line 20. Before iLogger, go ahead and do comma space and then go before the comma and type in user repository. Yep, and then space and then user repository is fine. Control period. We want to create and assign a field user repository. Yep, that one right there. All right. And then we need to bring in that namespace for that user repository. The first one. Yep. Excellent. Okay, now we can go back to line 18 and we could say await user repository dot create account async. And then open close parenthesis and pass in the model. There you go. And then after that line, let's go ahead and log again. Say logger.log information. So that'll give us a picture of what happened, right? And we can get more elaborate on that front. But we do have a problem with create account. So let's go see what create account, why it's complaining. Okay. It says that it needs to be a task. Nice. That makes it fully multi-threaded.
Wow.
All right. So multiple requests come in and it's just going to handle it like an Oracle, you know, with all the different hands and stuff. So let's go ahead and let me see, is this safe to run? Yeah, let's go ahead and run this and we'll test it out with Postman. And go ahead and send it. Ooh. Unable to resolve a service type for the repository, for user repository. So remember, we're injecting automatically using the dependency injection, but we didn't set up the configuration for the dependency injection. So let's go ahead and stop the browser and go back to Visual Studio. Program.cs. And in there, we're going to have to add a little piece of code. That little piece of code can go after line 10. So give me a blank line after line 10. One more. And let's go ahead and do builder.services. Get rid of the parentheses so I can see the IntelliSense. I don't memorize all this stuff.
Oh,
So yeah, get rid of the period and put the period. And we're going to say, scroll down a little bit. I believe it is going to be add transient. Yep, open, close, ankle brackets.
mhm.
And what we want in there is we want to put user repository, user repository, and then bring in the namespace. And then we need to give it a translation. So put a comma user repository. So we're saying whenever you see this interface, bring in the user repository instead. Okay, let's save this and run it again. See what we get. Run it. Woohoo. Right. Let's go to SQL, see what it did.
Whoa, cool.
You see, that's the password hash right there, and that's the password salt. So you need to put those two together in order to, to determine if the password matches. So you can never decrypt this. We're never going to know what is the true password. And so the only way to compare this is to pass in the password, re-encrypt it using the same salt, and see if the password hashes match. And that's the only way to do password matching when the person logs in. Kind of cool?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's continue.
Oops.
We need to go over to Visual Studio Code to add. And let's go over to, let's go to components and register.js. We should have an on submit.
Right.
Yeah. So right now all we're doing is just console logging on line 8, right? We need to call axios. So after the console log, we're going to leave the console log in there just for testing purposes. Do we have axios installed?
I don't think so.
Oh, let's install axios. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Let's install axios first.
All right.
Excellent. All right, let's go back and do some coding. Axios dot. Oh, go ahead and press tab so it brings in the namespace. Nice. And dot. And this is going to be a post. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and hit that API. And we're going to go ahead and pass in fields, which is one of the parameters that we get in this method. And then we're just going to go ahead and do a then. Dot then. And we're going to go ahead and give it a fat arrow function with a parameter called RESP, short for response. And go ahead and open up those curly braces and do the console log response. And then if there's any problems that we run into, let's go ahead and do the catch. And then let's do some indentation on lines 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Go ahead and indent those. I think that's it. We can run this. Oh, wait a second. Just save it and we'll go back to the browser because it's still running, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I canceled it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's run it. And let's go to register. And let's go ahead and open up your tools. Open up your yeah. And go to the console. Oh, we got some errors in there. Let's fix those errors real quick, Jonathan. scroll down, see if maybe class num it stands out to us.
Right here.
Go and save that. Let's go back to the browser and see what we got. Still not there, huh? Do you have another one? Maybe look for another one. Oh, there it is, 48. Oh, I bet you're gonna have them all 40, 57 because you copied and paste. That's the problem with copy and paste is that you're gonna copy that same error. All right. Let's go check out the browser and refresh it. All right, let's go register a user. Go put, you put any email, as long as it's not a duplicate email. This is your bank password?
Yep. Wait. Okay, I did the wrong one for the first one.
Oh, they didn't match.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go look at the database, see if it made it in there.
All right.
Run that again.
Hey.
Look at that. Hashes are completely different. That's cool. I think, you know what? I think this is a good place to stop, Jonathan.
Awesome.
There are a lot of improvements that we need to make on this application. But I think it'll be great to leave those for a separate show so that we can improve them, because there is a lot of improvements that we need, and I'd like to detail them out and explain why we need to do that. But once again, that sad moment begins to arrive, knowing that we've reached the end of our episode here, but at the same time, there's joy in knowing that there's plenty more that we'll be doing in 2022. So let's talk about what's in store for the next episode, Jonathan. We are going to add some error handling, and we're also going to be needing some sweet alerts to tell the user when something is right and when something is wrong.
Make it sweet.
Make it sweet. So yeah. So if anybody's, appreciating this work and they're benefiting from it and they're learning and they're not interested in buying the merch, they don't have the monthly income to be supporting us on Patreon, what other methods are there that they can show us that appreciation, Jonathan?
They can go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/theroadtocode and buy us a cup of coffee.
Or buy us 3 because there's 3 of us. So it's actually buymeacupofcoffee.com, right?
Yeah.
buymeacupofcoffee.com/theroadtocode. Very cool. Well, until next time.
Peace out.